name is Dr. Adityanji, and I am the president of the Council for Strategic Affairs. That's our logo. And those of you who registered probably saw this flyer. The topic for today's distinguished lecture is India-US Defense Collaboration, the Way Forward. And our distinguished speaker is Air Marshal, retired Anil Chopra. For sake of record, today is Saturday, December 14, 2024. It is 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, and it is 8:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time. So, of course, when we talk about India and US, these are the flags of the two countries. And I already talked about the topic today. A little bit about Council for Strategic Affairs. The Council imparts education in the field of international relations. CSA fosters discussion, dialogue, and debate on geopolitical issues. Council for Strategic Affairs encourages strategic studies in general to raise the level of awareness. We encourage publication of articles on geopolitics. The Council condemns terrorism in all its forms worldwide. We aim to contribute towards world peace and prosperity. CSA is registered as a 501c3 non-profit organization with the IRS in the United States. We request our US-based audience to donate and support the CSA, and the link is given here and it is there on the website also. So a little bit about our activities. We have a monthly roundtable discussion, usually held on second Saturday of each month, 10 a.m. But this month, it's a holiday month towards the end, so we compress the schedule. Monthly guest lecture by a domain expert on fourth Saturday of each month, which we are having on second Saturday because of the holidays later during this month. We also have a feature called One-on-One Interview, Strategically Speaking with Dr. Adityanji. Council organizes symposia, meetings, and conferences. We have a summer internship program for college students. We have a fellowship training program in strategic studies. And again, we will request our audience based in US to donate and support CSA. All your donations are tax exempt per IRS rules. And you can go to the website and either use PayPal link or True Karma link to donate. This is the picture of our distinguished speaker today. Our distinguished speaker is Air Marshal Anil Chopra, PVSM, AVSM, VM, VSM, highly decorated. He's a fighter pilot, a test pilot, a pioneer of Mirage 2000 fleet, who commanded a Mirage 2000 squadron and aircraft and system testing establishment. He was the team leader of MiG-21 Bison upgrade project in Russia. He has commanded the operational air bases in both western and eastern sectors. He was the head of IAF in the JNK and head of operational inspections in the IAF. He retired as an air officer personnel. He has been a member of a number of Armed Forces Tribunals, member of Executive Council of Jawaharlal Nehru University. He was Director General of a think tank called Center for Air Power Studies, or CAPS, for a period of 3 years, and he is still affiliated with CAPS as a distinguished fellow. He's an avid writer who has written more than 1,000 articles, published in various magazines and newspapers and books. He has authored 9 books, including 2 on China and Indo-Pacific, which is his favorite subject. He's invited for panel discussions and intellectual discourse by think tanks and on television and by eminent universities and colleges for lectures. Currently, he is the strategic advisor aerospace with the Society of Indian Defense Manufacturers. We are very privileged to have him give a distinguished lecture for Council for Strategic Affairs. We come back to our topic, India-US collaboration in defense. What is the way forward? Before I hand over the platform to Air Marshal Chopra, a few housekeeping rules. We request everyone to mute themselves to avoid noise interference. If you have your cell phone with you, please change it to vibration mode. Please do not try to interrupt our esteemed speaker. Only those members of the audience who identify themselves openly will be allowed to pose questions later on. We don't allow anonymous questioners. All the questions are to be sent to the chat room and they are moderated. Please be precise and specific in asking a question. Don't send lengthy comments in the form of a monologue. Lastly, we are recording this program. It is also being live streamed on our YouTube channel. It will be available on our website later as an educational resource and on our YouTube channel. And again, I will make an appeal for donations to the Council for Strategic Affairs. US-based audience, we request you to donate to CSA using the link. You can either mail a check to our PO Box address or use the PayPal link or True Karma link to donate to the CSA. Without further ado, it's my distinct honor and privilege to invite such an illustrious strategic thinker, Air Marshal Chopra. Sir, the platform is yours. We welcome you.
Thank you, Dr. Dityanji, and good morning, America, and good evening, India. Privilege, sir. Thank you for honoring me to come and speak to you all in this important platform, and allow me to share my presentation. Just give me a few seconds, and I hope my presentation is...
Yes, we can see the presentation. If you want to do it full screen, that should be fine.
Yeah, I'm trying. Okay, now I think that now it's a full screen now. Am I right?
Yes, it is full screen now.
All is good. And so we begin. And as the subject has already been introduced, that it is Indo-US defense collaboration way forward, something that's happened in abundance in the recent past. You know, we all acknowledge USA is the oldest and India is the largest democracies, and we have so much in common and so much to exploit together. But India-US relations have had, its ups and downs, but the defense collaboration in the last 15 years has been very significant. That's why this subject is the topic for today. I want to briefly mention that it is Asia's century. We all know 18th and 19th century was the British or European century because they are the ones who saw the Industrial Revolution. Then came the 20th century, technologies, information, the USA's century, and 21st century is going to be Asia century. If you see the picture on the left, it is the IMF chart which said that in 1850, India and China had nearly 50% of the world's GDP. And today, between China and India, we have a significant amount of global GDP. And by 2050, just within 200 years, we may be again very close to that figure of 50% of the GDP. But yes, USA today wants the world to be unipolar and Asia to be bipolar. China wants a bipolar world and unipolar Asia. They want to dominate. Russia wants a tripolar world. India and many other countries want a multipolar world. And of course, there is always, certainly in the last 4 or 5 years, talk about possible de-dollarization. That means some common other currency may be used, but I don't see it happening in a hurry. So with this little background, let me say that the two countries have had historic links. Christopher Columbus who actually went searching for India, landed up in America. The term Indian is actually an alternate for the indigenous people of that country and evolved as a thought he had, because he thought that he had arrived in East Indies. In the 19th century, the Americans were greatly influenced by Swami Vivekananda, the picture you can see on the screen, who promoted yoga and Vedanta in the United States at the World Parliament of Religions in Chicago in 1893. Mark Twain visited India in 1896, and he described his travelogues and concluded that India was the only foreign land that he would want to live, dream to live for the rest of his life. Margaret Woodrow Wilson, the daughter of the 28th US President Woodrow Wilson, became a devotee member of the ashram of Sri Aurobindo in Pondicherry for the remainder of her life. And during World War II, between 1940 and 45, India became the main base for the American China Burma India theater called the CBI theater for the war against Japan. And in 1930s and 40s, I must say that the American President Franklin Roosevelt voiced strong support for India's independence movement, despite being allies with Britain. The American position was based on the opposition to the Europeans having colonies, and he was expecting that the Americans will then have greater influence in post-independence India. Mahatma Gandhi had an important influence on the philosophy of non-violence promoted by American civil rights movement leader Martin Luther King in the 1950s. In the 20th century, Indian foreign policy has sought to leverage India's strategic autonomy to safeguard sovereign rights and promote national interests within a multipolar world. And currently, 77% of the Americans view India in a favorable and 79% of Indians view the United States very, very favorably. It's a very good figure. But how it became immediately after India's independence, there were, ups and downs in our relationships. In the 1950s, USA was trying to woo India because they wanted a bulwark against fortification against the communism. It had hoped that the Western educated aristocrat Jawaharlal Nehru would be a support, but then he was basically had some socialist ideas. USA wanted India to join the American-led Seattle or CENTO treaty organization, but India was more inclined to be non-aligned and one of the leading proponents of the non-aligned movement. And the United States did not consider neutrality to be an acceptable position that time. And India was more inclined towards that. Pakistan joined CENTO and USA began arming Pakistan. But India needed to have some global friends, and therefore India chose to befriend the Soviet side. Notwithstanding the poor harvest forced India to ask for American aid for its food security. And from 1947 to 1959, US provided 1.7 billion in dollars in aid, out of which nearly 1 billion was for food. And USA bailed India out through the long-term public law PL 480. We all know about it. And during John F. Kennedy's presidency in 1961 and 63, India and China went through a war, and the Americans came on our side, and they wanted to, partner with us, and finally did give us some military aid after the 1962 China conflict. USA did come to India's support, even subsequently, despite they being embroiled and still recovering from the Korean War and getting into the Vietnam War. In the period of 1963 to 1992, the relations became as cold as the Cold War. After Soviet Union and China had a border skirmish in 1969 to split international communism. USA decided to woo China. This was to India's detriment and pushed India even closer to the Soviet Union. And USA supported Pakistan with the latest equipments. We all know the F-86 Sabres, the F-104 Starfighters. India still kept maintaining cordial diplomatic relations with USA with the hope that we will be friends soon. But things began to change after the implosion of the Soviet Union in 1991. And the Clinton-Narasimha Rao years were a mixed bag with the lack of feeling of trust, if I may use that word. Indo-US relations were based on perpetual caution, hope, and disappointment mixed with attempts to for future cooperation. For many reasons, India has been also cautious because of international examples showed that USA could dump a friend or an ally sometimes because of its own interests. It was finally the right wing of right of center BJP government that really brought India closer to USA. In the early 21st century, evolved significantly, becoming a more robust and multi-dimensional strategic partnership from a distance to and a hostile relationship that had been there for so many years. In 1998, India did the nuclear weapons tests, which resulted in severe sanctions from USA, Japan, European countries, and many others. And non-proliferation dialogue initiated after the 98 nuclear tests has bridged many of the gaps that understanding between the two countries. Finally, India and United States civil nuclear agreement, also referred to as the 123 agreement, signed on October 10, 2008, brought the two countries closer. USA took a strong stand against Pakistan during Kargil war, and it was clear sign that India and the USA were becoming closer. A significant activity took place during the Manmohan Singh years. UPA 1 and UPA 2 governments, 2004 to 2014, saw further push. George W. Bush said India is a great example of democracy and that world needs India. India and US understood how critical it was for them to work together, address both the bilateral and global issues. India-US bilateral relations started developing into a global strategic partnership from here on. And this was valued greatly by both sides on all global and bilateral issues. US-India nuclear agreement framework signed in July 18, 2005. In March 2009, Obama administration cleared the sale of 8 PATI for US dollars $2.1 billion. And in November 2010, President Obama visited India and addressed the joint session of India's parliament, where he backed India's bid for a permanent seat in the United Nations Security Council. The $5 billion agreement to provide India with the Boeing C-117 military transport aircraft and General Electric F-404 engines for the LCA was announced during Obama's November 2010 visit. This made the US get into greater military engagement, and soon US became the third largest supplier of defense equipment to India after Russia and Israel. US Chairman of Joint Chiefs of Staff Mike Mullen encouraged stronger military ties between the two nations and said that India has emerged as an increasingly important strategic partner for the US. Yet all was not hunky-dory. In May 2009, Obama reiterated his anti-outsourcing views and criticized US tax policy that says that you should pay lower taxes if you create jobs for people in Bangalore in India, and then if you create one in Buffalo in New York. So therefore, This was always an issue. In the early 2010s, India and US governments differed on a variety of regional issues, ranging from America's military relations with Pakistan, India's cordial relations with Russia as a foreign policy issue related, and our relations with Iran, Sri Lanka, Maldives, Myanmar, and Bangladesh. We had differences of opinion between the two sides. But Robert Blake, Assistant Secretary of State for South and Central Asian Affairs, dismissed any concerns over a rift with India regarding America's Afghan or Pakistan policies, calling India and the United States as natural allies. Blake said that the United States cannot afford to meet the strategic priorities in Pakistan and Afghanistan at the expense of India. In June 2010, during President Obama declared that from the firm belief that the Americans' relationship with India will be one of the defining partnerships of the 21st century. USA made a big issue about 2002 Gujarat riots. The US government policy of considering Modi as a persona non grata had resulted in a de facto travel ban for him from 2005 to 2014. But in 2012, India's Supreme Court had absolved Narendra Modi of any complicity in those riots. And India-United States relations have improved significantly during premiership of Narendra Modi since 2014. At present, India and US share an extensive and expanding cultural, strategic, military, and economic relationship, a phase of implementing confidence-building measures to overcome the legacy of trust deficit brought about by adversarial US foreign policy assessments and multiple instances of technology denial to India. Since 2016, India and US have been holding 2+2 dialogues where the foreign and defense ministers of the two countries are meeting regularly. The Quad grouping, which was initiated in 2007 by the Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, with the support of course, the other partners, there have been a lot of activity. The dialogue was in parallel. A lot of joint military exercises began, specifically the Malabar exercise, and the scale kept increasing. The diplomatic and military arrangements were widely viewed in response to the increased Chinese economic and military power. Quad has since been a great action, especially after the COVID in the last 3-4 years. It is clear that without India, there can be no Indo-Pacific strategy, and that is why India is one of the most important members of Quad. Increasingly assertive China, robust Indo-US cooperation on counterterrorism, the deterioration of US-Pakistan relations, easing of export controls over dual-use goods and technologies. 99% of licenses applied for now are being approved. The reversal of long-standing American opposition to India's strategic approach all has happened in the last few years. Yeah, okay. I will request whosoever is talking to kindly, mute yourself. In October 2018, India inked the
Komodo Ranjit Rai, please mute yourself.
$5.4 billion deal with Russia to procure 5 S-400 surface-to-air missile defense systems, one of the most powerful missile defense systems in the world. It was one of the Americans chose to ignore, this, despite having threatened to apply CAATSA, and the United States also threatened India with sanctions over India's decision to buy oil from Iran. But once again, physically no action was taken. In India's eye, the United States would once again be regarded as untrustworthy every time such a threat happened. But the Trump administration decided not to sanction India for the Russian S-400 missile systems, but at the same time sanctioned Turkey and China for the same purchases. President Trump has grown closer to India's BJP government, which shares the similar, somewhat right-wing views. He has repeatedly praised Modi's leadership and avoided any negative criticism of India's government or actions, even in case of CAA or Kashmir issues. On 21st December 2020, President of the United States, Donald Trump, awarded Modi with the Legion of Merit for elevating India's United States relations together. Although there are certain differences over Russian invasion of Ukraine, the United States and India have strengthened cooperation in defense, semiconductors, critical minerals, space, among many other fields. Even during Joe Biden's presidency, the joint statement declared the two countries to have strong ties spanning seas to stars. As India and USA further move around on geostrategic interests, there was congruence on views and visions on what was going around the globe. India's weapon system requirements have been there. We have been stuck with not stuck, we have been with the Russian side for a long time. At one point, 85% of India's defense hardware was from Russia, stroke Soviet Union. Today also it is close to 60-65%. India needed some high-end technologies for furthering its own Atmanirbharta in defense production. Since the turn of the century, there have been increased activity in security fields with many military, industrial, logistics, and communications-related agreements between the two sides, more about which I will be speaking shortly. USA needed assurance about security of communication and use of our equipment so that the technologies could not be shared by us to any adversary. The military-industrial complexes of both the countries wanted to engage much more with each other, yet maintaining the sensitivities and hindrances, and therefore the continuous need for agreements and military action, aviation, which uses the highest levels of technologies, and also the obsolescence sets in faster, was the greatest beneficiary of Indo-US cooperation. It's not because I'm a military aviator that I'm saying so. So let's see what all we purchased from Americans all after 2008. I first ordered the Lockheed C-130J-30 Super Hercules aircraft in early 2008 for special operations under US government's foreign military sales program. Indian Navy received the Boeing P-8I, initially 8 of them. The numbers went up to 12. They'll soon go up to 20. These are for electronic surveillance, maritime surveillance, electronic intelligence, anti-submarine warfare. In 2009, I have procured the 3 specially equipped Boeing 737 business jets for VIP duties. The Boeing C-17 Globemaster 3 strategic airlifter followed, and then came the Boeing 777 VVIP transport aircraft for the President and Prime Minister to replace the old Air India Boeing 747s. The Boeing Apache Longbow attack helicopter, the Seahawk helicopters for the Navy, and Boeing's Chinook heavy lift helicopters were the important rotary wing purchases that India has done. More recently, the Predator MQ-9-8, which was cleared as early as 2017, but recently this deal was signed, $3.8 billion deal for acquiring 31 Predators has been signed. And of course, the package includes the maintenance, repairs, and overall the MRO facilities in India, and the various other things that follow. We signed with the General Atomics, one of the biggest UAV companies of the world. The deal was based on intergovernmental agreement. Again, the drones will actually arrive in India only in 2017. There, of course, been the deals of the Harpoon anti-ship missiles and the M777, howitzers. Now, all this has been possible because of the logistics, communications, or defense enabling agreements that have been signed between the two sides. And I think this is very, very important, need to be dwelt on. The militaries are exercising more regularly. There was a need for logistics agreements for each other to take fuel and other lubricants. In 2002, the two countries signed the General Security Military Information Agreement, which makes sure that the necessary secrecy is maintained by both sides. The logistics exchange memorandum of agreement was signed in 2016, which allowed the two countries to use each other's military bases and carry out repairs and use each other's logistic supports for both ships, aircraft, and everything else. Then came the communication compatibility and security arrangement signed in 2018. Now, this was very important because some of the aircraft that India had bought from the US, C-17, C-130, P-8Is, their interactions during exercises or when they're communicating with other aeroplanes of origin from other countries like Russia, this was important that this compatibility and security agreement is put in place. And in 2020, the Basic Exchange Cooperation Agreement, BECA, was signed. The BECA focuses on providing American geospatial intelligence to India. You know, interestingly, it came at the time when the US-China relations were deteriorating, and also we had this Galwan incident, Galwan Valley skirmish between India and China on the border, and this was important for us to get more intelligence more freely for both for all kinds of platforms and security reasons. So more recently this year, our defense minister went to USA and signed the security of supplies agreement. This is very important if the industry of both the sides have to work together. The US has emerged as the biggest defense importer of Indian-made subsystems, like we have become a major importer of the big system. SOSA would give US companies more freedom and allow them to widen their base in India by manufacturing, sourcing more within India. The US has signed SOSA with 18 other countries and, of course, a few non-allies and non-NATO countries, like now they have done with India. SOSA will allow US to request priority delivery of items which have been already contracted with contractors within India. And same will happen when Indians are purchasing items from American companies. A priority will be given so that the chain disruptions of supplies will not take place. The US assurance is backed by the US defense priorities and allocation system, supported by the Department of Defense. And in turn, India has established a government industry body here so that this transfers can be happening, very clearly. But we must remember that SOSA has no legal bindings, but this is an arrangement, and therefore the next logical step is going to be the reciprocal defense procurement agreement, which should be signed very clearly. And this will be, once that is signed, there will be a binding on the companies on both sides, so that the physical transfer, buying and selling. The agreement will also allow American companies to bypass the Buy America statute and more easily allow them to get manufacturing bases in India more and more. We already know Lockheed, Boeing, and many of them have already set up shop in India. They are big manufacturers. GE is here in big numbers, but the RDP will help this process much greater. And lastly, I must mention here that the liaison officers MOU, we have always had defense attaches, but it was a joint decision. Over and above that, we had decided to deploy 3 colonel-level officers, one each at the Hawaii headquartered Indo-Pacific Command, the Special Operations Command in Florida, and the US-led multinational maritime force called the Combined Maritime Force in Bahrain. We had already positioned people. The above arrangement was over and above the air attaches and defense attaches that we post to each other. More such arrangements are being worked out, including at the Maritime Domain Awareness Center in Delhi, in Gurgaon, where similar arrangements are being worked out. So India has needed strategic support at global level. The US, after US started developing interest in India, has and China became a competitor, a possible rival, has brought India into USA's Indo-Pacific strategy. India needed US cooperation in global security matters, support for including India to the United Nations Security Council. We needed a greater role in World Bank, the IMF, Security Council, the admission into multilateral export control regimes like the Nuclear Supplies Group, the MTCR, the Vassner arrangement, and Australia Group. And post 2000, USA became more open to all this, and also selling to India high-end technologies, critical minerals, etc. So let me tell you how the companies, the American defense companies, are sitting here in a big way. Lockheed Martin, the world's biggest defense manufacturer, has a joint venture company with Tata Advanced Systems Limited, TASL, where airframe and components for the C-130J airlifter and the S-992 helicopter are being manufactured in India in large numbers for all their global customers. All C-130Js delivered to any customer in the world will have aerostructures which are made in India. TSL has been chosen to produce the F-16 wings in India. This will be the only plant making in the world. Meanwhile, Lockheed Martin is promoting many defense and aerospace startups. Lockheed Martin is also provides research grants for teams from Indian universities to work with the local industry partners to develop design for specifications given by them. Lockheed Martin is also sponsored support the India Innovation Growth Program since 2007 in partnership with the Indian Department of Science and Technology, Indo-US Science and Technology Forum, India's Federation of Indian Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Stanford Graduate School of Business, and the IC2 Institute at the universities of Texas. And IIGP has supported more than 400 innovators and startups to date, and the revenue generated from these entrepreneurs through this program has been over $1 billion. India already has a large number of Boeing airliners. Other than civil airliners, Boeing also has come big into military. We have, as I mentioned, C-17, BBJ, BBIP, B777, the Chinook, the Apache helicopter, the Indian Navy's P-8I. So huge, Boeing presence in the military. And of course, the GE has, and of course, Boeing has partnered with the HAL and Mahindra's at global scale manufacturing supply chain expertise. HAL has been single source of supplies of the 757, Boeing 757 overwing exit doors. HAL has also been manufacturing the 777 uplock boxes, the FA-18 gun bay doors, the FA-18 wire harnesses, the P-8I weapons door bay doors, and many, many other things, including they are importing a lot of things from Bharat Electronics in India for F-18 aircraft. Boeing has invested hugely in an engineering center at Bengaluru and Chennai with the talent pool of over 3,000 engineers. Boeing's joint venture is already manufacturing aerostructures for Chinook, Apache helicopters, including for the global customers. Boeing is also working with many Indian defense companies. And of course, GE Aviation is the world's largest producer, one of the largest producers of large and small engines for commercial, military, business, and general aviation aircraft. For us in the defense, their engine, the F404, is on the LCA Tejas Mark 1 and 1A, and the 414 engines were selected to power the LCA Mark II. They will also be on the initial AMCA, the fifth generation aircraft, till we get a better engine. These will be made in India through technology transfer. Of course, there are question marks how much technology will physically be transferred, but we are given to believe that it will be not less than 80-85%. GE has joined with Tata Group to make the LEAP engines in India. A significant number of components are already being made. So to manage this whole madness of defense relations between the two countries, there is a lot of joint working groups, forums that have been made. This include the Defense Joint Working Group, DJWG, the Defense Procurement and Production Group, Senior Technology Security Group, the Joint Technical Group, the Military Cooperation Group, the Service to Service Executive Steering Groups, and many more. Let us look at a few of them, which I think are more important, the last four of them. The India-US Defense Technology and Trade Initiative, DTTI, which was signed in 2012. The DTTI strengthens India's defense industrial base, explores new areas of technology and development, and expanding Indo-US business ties. The DTTI has now matured enough where there are varied activities which are taking place and translating themselves into accomplishments. Among the ambitious projects identified, plan to share jet engine technology initiative that has floundered given the strict export controls regime that the US has followed for so many years. But there is focus on startups likely to enable US-based research labs to work in coordination with Indian companies for cutting-edge defense technologies. In addition, the two sides are also discussing possibility of joint development of systems approved and subsequently sell it to third world nations as a purpose of looking for export opportunities. The strategic trade authorization one, United States has designated India as a strategic trade authorization one, a country that will allow, an arrangement that will allow the country to buy highly advanced and cutting-edge sensitive technologies from America. This status had earlier been reserved only for the closest allies of American partners, such as the NATO members, Japan, South Korea, and Australia. And with India getting STA1, it's a big thing. This eases the restrictions for high technology product sales to India. India will receive license-free access to a wide range of dual-use technologies, and in conjunction with the steps that India has committed to take to advance its export control objectives. It will benefit US manufacturers while continuing to protect its national security. Bilateral defense trade, which is essentially zero in 2008, is by 2022 was at $22 billion. The US-India Business Council, USIBC, was formed in 1975. For many years, it was mainly trying to find a good solution between the two countries in terms of investment flows. But the organization has, in the recent past, served as a direct link between businesses and government leaders of both the countries, especially so in aerospace and defense, which have become their major areas in the last decade or so. The Indo-US Defense Policy Group, which sits in Washington, is the top official level meeting mechanism between India and the US on defense issues, which comprehensively reviews and guides all aspects of bilateral cooperation between the two countries. And the meetings take stock of the progress made in various fields of defense cooperation, including the defense trade, technology, procurements, industry, R&D, military-to-military engagements, and there are a large number of subgroups which handle these various aspects. Very important thing that's happening between the two countries is the military exercises. We immediately after 1962 war, when India, I wouldn't say got a drubbing, but was found wanting, and the Americans, along with the Brits and the Australians, they came to do an exercise, air defense exercise, Shiksha. They brought radars, they gifted those radars to us. But in the last, you can say 15 years, very significant exercise being done by all the three armed forces of India, Indo-US, the joint army exercises like Yuddha Abhyas, Vajra Prahar, among many others are being done by the army. The Navy, of course, participates in the Rim of Pacific, that is RIMPEC exercise. USA comes and participates in exercise Malabar. Many other navies, of course, friendly navies also join in these. Indian Air Force and USAF have been participating in the the Pacific Air Force sponsored COP India exercise for many years, since 2004. It's conducted in India. IF has been participating in the Red Flag exercises in USA, Nellis Air Base, and also in Alaska, which is an advanced air combat exercise. And of course, we have participated together in exercise Pitch Black in Australia, where there were close to 20 air forces of the world, including the F-35s were flown by many countries. More recently, we in India have carried out the Tarang Shakti exercise, where 18 air forces participate, and US came with a large contingent of over 10 aircraft and 200 personnel. So there are, of course, cooperation in counterterrorism is another area where we are working very closely, because both of us are affected by terrorism. Now, India and US, everything is not honky-dory. I mean, this is important to understand. There are frictions, and these frictions, diplomatic efforts are on to reduce this friction. But it's important for me to highlight and flag these frictions that are there. Of course, for many years, non-alignment, India's ties with Soviet Union, Russia, they were an issue. USA's ties with Pakistan was an issue for India, and we found that many times what USA was giving to the Pakistanis for anti-terrorist operations were actually going to be used by us. And there is a strong feeling among many in India that USA has brazenly engineered a military coup in Bangladesh, toppling the democratically elected PM Sheikh Hasina government. Maybe she had also invited trouble for herself, but by installing a US puppet, Muhammad Yunus, many in India, the analysts feel that this has been engineered from powerful sources within the USA. Of course, our government's position remains more diplomatic on this subject. India's close defense ties with Russia is, as I mentioned, S-400. There have been issues. The India-China relations continue to be a little complicated, because India still has a huge amount of trade with China, and US sometimes feel that India is going a little slow. The Americans would want India to be much more aggressive in the Indo-Pacific, in the Quad strategy. They would rather have some kind of a military arrangement, but because of India, Quad remains short of a military alliance, and I'll speak a little more about the Quad in a short while from now. So India's neutral stand on the Ukraine war was again not greatly appreciated. India continuing to buy, a huge amount of petroleum and oil products from Russia in the last 1 year was again not, appreciated. And India continuing to maintain strategic autonomy and independent foreign policy. There have been issues. India was castigated for violating the unilateral financial sanctions that the Americans and the West had put against Russia. So there have been issues. The US is a more aggressive stand in pushing alliances against China. And as I said, that we want to continue to, maintain some kind of a stance which is not as strong. Though India supports the Quad, its full militarization as an alliance is not acceptable to India's, and the US wants tougher stand from India rather than continuing to be having this strategic autonomy in place. While at the political executive level, there is a monotony, but certain bureaucrats in US Department of State and Intelligence Agency, we feel, still harbor the Cold War mentality and are reflexively anti-India. So this is the feeling many people have. India, in the recent two incidents of the Canadian Sikh terrorist Nijjar case and the America stand on Sikh American terrorist Punoon, has hurt Indian interests and feelings among many. Extraterritorial application of US laws in foreign countries is a cause of concern for India, and India feels that US deep state is suspected to be backing weaker politicians in India so that they can manipulate and have greater hold over India. Trade has been a persistent sore point between India and the US. And we go through these ups and downs. The growing economic relationship between the two countries is bound to have issues. There's the battle of tariffs and market access. The US has lashed out in India for its monopoly of excessive taxes on imported goods. In fact, the former US president and the future US President Donald Trump had referred to India as the tariff king. His administration had labeled India as the currency manipulator and had put limits on the number of H-1B visas for India. And there is already a talk that such a thing may happen once again when he comes. But I think the Americans need Indians, and Indians are good people. They are doing a good job there. On the other hand, India has her own grievances. The generalized system of preferences program give freedom from tariffs for a few categories of exports to select countries. India was removed from this GSP program in 2019 during Trump's first presidency. The issue of immigration has always been an issue, sensitive. India-US relations, especially in the context of H-1B visa program, which enables the American businesses to bring in skilled foreign employees, and Indians are one of the largest beneficiaries of this program. And it's important that this remains smoothly. The US establishment has often weaponized and politicized the issue of human rights in other countries selectively without doing their own introspection. Instruments of the State Department like US CIRF and the international ambassadors for religious freedom are tools of the State Department that do not review human rights violations within the US. So I thought it was important to highlight some of these things. And of course, there has been a issue about Citizenship Amendment Act, and the blind eye towards the prosecution of ethnic cleansing of Hindus in many countries of the world, including in Bangladesh in the recent past. The government of India has also noted that every country, including the United States, has domestic problems, and there is no single societal or political bracket that would fit all the geopolitical situations. And the US and its treaty allies from the Five Eyes countries have supported terrorist organizations in India, have sheltered proclaimed terrorists who are wanted in India. And we know the US has constantly refused to extradite terror suspects like Dawood Gilani and some others who India thinks are important. And similarly, financial and logistic support to disrupt the Indian economy by way of the so-called farmers' agitation, blockade of national capital, CAA, NRC. These are some of the issues. The RAND Corporation report has recently said the relationship between India and US is fundamentally fragile. So fair enough. I think we are large democracies. We have to have some levels of fragility, frictions. But I think we are negotiating fairly well. And notwithstanding this 2 slides full of lists that I have just shown you, things are moving positively. I want to show 1 or 2 small slides before I wrap up this presentation. You see, this is a power index, a 2-year-old power index, but nothing much has changed. What I want to highlight is that in China and India have huge militaries, but on the right side, the bar graph that you see shows that in power index, United States, of course, the leader, the Russians are behind. Maybe they are a little more behind than what is indicated over here. China is nearly caught up with Russia. May one day, of course, will overshoot them someday. India is number 4, but if you see the gap between India and China, the power index-wise, it's significant. Though while we in India keep priding that India is the 4th most powerful, military in the world, but there are gaps that needs to be filled, and US-India relations are important from that context. I also want to highlight that because Quad couldn't become a military alliance, and so much more needed to be done, a lot of trilaterals what we call the tangled trilaterals have come up between the countries. We know the AUKUS was formed because the Americans wanted the Australians to get to spend more money on defense for a continental size country. The Australian armed forces are 10 times smaller than India's. So I think similarly, there are other trilaterals which have emerged. There are, I must also mention that Quad has come a long way. Today we have got 2+2 ministerial meeting between all the members, and on their own, there are these logistic agreements between all the members on bilateral basis, and they are doing all kinds of defense dialogues. All are doing staff talks at the services level. There's the bilateral military exercises. There are multilateral military exercises. Everything has happened. Of course, the defense deals are only with America, but they are the only among the lot who can, sell something to the other members, and especially to India. I want to highlight one more thing about regional alliances. When it comes to Indo-Pacific, when it comes to Quad, look at who are the China's real friends. Only two who are absolutely in their grouping, and that happens to be Pakistan and North Korea. And look at who are the American friends, our American aligned countries. And if you compare the GDPs of the pro-China countries, they are paupers. The pro-USA countries are all self-contained. They are on their own. They are rich. They are, able to put in a large amount of military strength. They have their views of their own. So therefore, the point I'm making is that when it comes to Indo-Pacific, where India-US relations are concerned, I think we are sitting very pretty. And I now come to the last part of my presentation, which is the way forward. Collaboration remains paramount. Despite all these pinpricks, need for collaboration remains important. The US-India needs each other to navigate the complexities of the rapidly changing global landscape. Joint initiatives, dialogues aimed at addressing these challenges can pave the way for a more resilient partnership. India, as the leader of the global South, has always believed in Vasudeva Kutumbakam, the glimpses of which have also been visible in our foreign policy. We did a very successful G20 last year, which had a clear final outcome. Their excellent relations India maintains not only with US, Europe, but also with Russia and many other countries, especially in West Asia. India is respected by the global South. This is a big, it's so very important for the Americans to understand that we are sort of a leader for the global South. PM Modi has made, very successful visit both to the US, to Russia. PM Modi has got excellent rapport. PM Modi went to Poland and Ukraine recently. He's, I think, one of the best persons to, because of our dialogue with both the sides, and more acceptable to the rest of the world, we can contribute to a final peaceful outcome in Ukraine. The Quad is getting strengthened. India's relations with USA remains special, will so more so because we are vibrant democracies, but much more needs to be done. On some counts, I think the Indo-Pacific defense cooperation is moving in a correct direction. India and the US are looking at critical minerals, and semiconductors is an area where we need to do much more. There is more need to be done, despite the Americans getting the nuclear deal through. Not many American companies have been able to invest in the nuclear, programs of the country. But the bilateral trade is increasing. It's a year back it was $191 billion. I see it going to 1 trillion in maybe next 10, 12 years. So that's the kind of relation between the two. Giants like Google, Amazon, Microsoft have invested hugely in India. And Tesla is coming up next, and there is a huge contribution of the country in the technology boom. There is, the Silicon Valley is already being run mostly by Indians. Many CEOs in US are of Indian origin, and Indian companies have made significant investments across 35 states, creating a large number of jobs for the Americans. Big corporations. India and US have in recent years, instituted structural dialogues. We have covering various parts of the world, including East Asia, Central Asia, West Asia, Africa, and high-level, high technology cooperation groups have been set up, and they have a greater role. Defense interoperability is increasing. More needs to be done. And as I said, bilateral joint working groups on civil space cooperation provides a good forum for joint work in space. Maybe the first astronaut will go up next from India, maybe on an American, spacecraft. President Trump's coming back in January. The Indians are very hopeful. The TV debates in India show that they are looking up to it, though some of them are concerned about the H-1B visa, etc. 3.5 million plus Indian diaspora, including Aditya ji and many others, are contributing a great to the America. More than 1% of American population is from this group. India, US are both taking slow but steady, firm-footed steps, if I may use those words, to get closer as the global security partners. Maritime engagement, military aviation have been two areas of the greatest beneficiaries of these cooperations. I have been coming on debates to say, could one day India have the F-35 fifth generation aircraft, because our own is lagging behind. This is the kind of more of this I can discuss in the question answers. In all this, India gets to retain its strategic autonomy. And with this few words, I must thank Aditya ji for inviting me for this, talk on our defense cooperation, which has become very significant, and not only on the defense cooperation, but I see a great future ahead, and we have to, both the sides have to put, the bullet together, and hopefully we will move data forward. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed, Air Marshal Anil Chopra, for a very extensive and comprehensive lecture, which does not just talk about India-US defense collaboration, but it went into the historical antecedents of India-US relationship, bilateral relationship. So in that sense, it was a very, educational and enriching lecture. Thank you very much indeed for, coming on our platform and giving this extensive talk on a weekend. We will start with questions and answers, but before I go to the chat room for questions from the audience, I have a couple of questions of my own. So although you pretty much covered everything, including the what's and all in the relationship, there were a couple of things that I would like to highlight that have not been covered. One is the US FONOPS in India's EEZ and the way it was handled by the US. You want to comment on that?
Yeah, yes. I thought I will cover, but since the subject was a little large, yes, there was this incident in the Arabian Sea where the Americans had come. They came into the area of our jurisdiction, and finally the Indians saw it, and Indians pushed them out. It caused a little embarrassment between the two sides, but that's not new. I have always believed that the Americans do this kind of a thing, but they are conscious that we are not blind. Our radars, our satellites, they watch everything. Our Navy is extremely active. The PATIs are watching, at least at any given time. Most of the Northern Indian Ocean, Bay of Bengal and Arabian Sea are well covered. Indian Navy's outstanding performance in anti-piracy operations have been watched by everybody. We have supported every country, including Pakistan, in that. So I think this was one of those incidents which, brushed each other. I'm happy that finally the thing died down, and the Americans thereafter became very conscious. And I hope that similar things will not happen. FONOPS is a big subject for us because what's happened in South China Sea, what will happen, FONOPS will happen when the Arctic routes start opening up. FONOPS will be an issue in many other places. FONOPS is an issue in the Red Sea where the all kinds of belligerents are very active. So FONOPS is a hot subject, but I think the navies are talking and the countries are talking, yes.
Second issue is about the reliability of any kind of supplies from the United States. The impression in India is that US is not a reliable partner and not a reliable supplier, and that is indicated by GE's failure to deliver GE 404 engines for a contract that was signed in 2021, and these engines had to be supplied in February of 2024. And in recent defense minister's visit to US, this issue had to be brought and India had to invoke the penalty clause, and GE now restructuring the delivery schedule. So do you want to comment on this? Because this is not the first time it has happened. It is a perennial problem with United States, the reliability of its agreements and deliveries.
Yeah, let me tell you, it's not the first time that's happened. It's happened before. It'll happen again. These supply chains complexities are there. I analyze. You look at the supply chains that problems that we have had with the Soviet Union and Russia and continue to have even today. There are multiple issues. Mind you, most of these aircraft companies, Lockheed, Boeing, or even the engine company, they're not making the whole engine on their own. They have got their own supply chains. And, in anything, even a single component that doesn't reach on time, there is an issue. But I totally agree. It bothers us. The Indian Air Force was to get the LCA Mark 1A by 31st of March. We haven't got it. We were to get it within 3 years. The aircraft is ready. I'm not saying that there may be some other problems also with the aircraft, but notwithstanding, the engine is 30% of the aircraft. If the engine doesn't come, of course, finally we have built our first aircraft with our own earlier engines that were with us. But this contract was critical. There is a difference between the earlier supplied engines and the new engine. And therefore, this is an issue that required the defense minister of India to go and raise it in US. And I hope I've been given to understand that the GE has said that they will make good the numbers, that they will increase the supplies. So maybe in the period of another 12 months, the numbers would have, the backlog will be caught up. I'm not sure it will happen. We are still waiting for the first engine, and then only we will know. Where earlier plan was to supply one engine a month. Now will they be able to supply two? I'm not very sure. But supply chain. But the only point I want to highlight is not necessarily an issue only with the Americans. We have had supply chain issues with Germans. We have had with Russians, with Soviets, with many countries. That is why India is so concerned and wants to become more and more Atmanirbhar. We must have alternate sources. Supply chain must be secure. And this is a big lesson the world has learned from Ukraine. And this feeling among Indians that the Americans can dump you, they can arm twist you, is been there, and it will always be there. If at one point we were 85% with the Soviet Union, and now we slowly become 30% with the Americans, then we have another person who's capable of, the safest we find are European countries. It's easier to work with France on Mirage 2000, on the Rafale deals, because the capacity to arm twist is so much lesser. But when it comes to bigger powers, especially USA, which is the number one power for last 30 years, there is that risk, and India is very, very conscious of it. And most defense analysts, including me, we talk about it and we write about it. Yes.
So there's a question in the chat room from Nakshatra Jagannath. For our viewers, Nakshatra Jagannath finished a 1-year-long strategic studies fellowship training with CSA. So he's an alumni of CSA. And the question is, will India's closeness with Russia, which is actively pursuing de-dollarization through BRICS, have any effect on Indo-US collaboration, considering the most recent statement made by the US President-elect Donald Trump, warning countries attempting to weaken the dollar, and India constantly clarifying that it has no interest in doing the same. How will India navigate between the two crucial partners in terms of defense collaboration and beyond?
Let me put it into two separate parts of this question. Question number one: our umbilical cord with Russia cannot be snapped for long time to come. We are connected. They came to our support for many years. During the Cold War, they were supporting us. When the Seventh Fleet moved into the Bay of Bengal in 1971 war, before that, the Russian submarines were waiting for them. So we have to, and the Americans well understand that we cannot. That's why this CAATSA was not applied. We bought the S-400. Also, we bought 10 times more oil last year from Russia. And we have already signed a contract for next 10 years. Reliance has signed with Rosneft, which we will be buying oil from them for years to come. Nearly 50% of the oil for India will come from there. So, but the Americans are conscious of this, and this will not be allowed to become a hurdle. But when it comes to de-dollarization, India was first. Indian foreign minister made a statement very clearly that we have no such plan. We are not party to any exercise of de-dollarization at this stage. So yes. Now, what is de-dollarization? Yes, a global says de-dollarization is important. But when the sanctions were put, how did you think the Russians and the Indians traded oil? You were doing it, swapping your own currencies. So there were issues. Why S-400 has got delayed to India? One of the reasons is also that how do we pay them back, not in dollars, but in rupees. In rupees means the Russians must buy a lot of things from India. So there are some kind of one-to-ones when you apply sanctions will take place like it's taking place. The trade between all these years before in Soviet Union, before the Cold War, India and Russia, we had to give them a shipload of bananas to get one aircraft from them or something like that, or hosiery or whatever we gave. So that kind of exercise we had to fall back because of the sanctions, and that dollar payments could not be made to Russia for the S-400 or for the oil. So some kind of arrangements, mind you, you have put sanctions, but the Europeans are continuing to benefit from natural resources of Russia even today after 3 years of the Ukraine conflict. So this dynamics of the world will continue, but India's official position is very clearly stated that we are not supporting de-dollarization. You might do some trade with on yuan with China, or God knows what we will do. Of course, we are trading with China with dollars.
Chopra, if I may intervene here, even Russian Federation's official policy is that they don't intend to participate in de-dollarization. President Putin himself has stated that Russia is not for de-dollarization. It's the United States which prevented Russia from accessing international trade using dollar as the reserve currency. So it's a very complex situation. Let's move on to the next part, how India will navigate between Russia and US.
Sorry.
How India will navigate between two strategic partners, Russia and US, in terms of defense collaboration.
Yeah. So as I said, our position is now if I have 45% of Indian Air Force fighter fleet today is of Su-30 single type. I'm not counting the MiG-29, which are with the Indian Air Force and with the the Navy. You see the tanks. The 90% of the tanks with the Indian Army of the T-72 and T-90 of the Russian origin. And even if we are making them in India, some chunks of materials are coming from Russia. So therefore, this balancing act has been going on for some time. In the last 2 decades, once the Americans started giving us their defense equipment, there was this, they were conscious. Americans are keen that we get wooed away from Russia. I mean, our dependence on Russia. Of course, even India wouldn't want that all our eggs are in the same basket. We don't want that we continue to be dependent on Russia because their supply chains are even more complex. You know, the custom procedure, the way equipments come from Russia to India is a much longer chain, even for the pairs when we send items. So certainly, I personally have been writing that we must gradually, in a period of next 20 years, from our 60% Russian basket, we should come to 30%. We should let the Western basket hit up to and not more than 30%. And 40% of the basket must be Indian. So that one day down the line, 30, 40 years, we are 75 to 80% Indian basket. So that is the way the balancing is being done. We have treaded the Ukraine thing very, very carefully. You know, you saw wherever we chose to abstain. We continue to support the Palestinians, yet we are very friendly with Israel. We continue to feel, and the Prime Minister in the beginning of the conflict said that we do not believe war is the answer. We also said that we respect international borders. All that has been said. But in India, we also feel that this war was forced onto Russia in a way because, it was a Cuba moment for Russia. Ukraine was the only country, so such a large number of countries have joined NATO. I remember I was in Russia during President Yeltsin's times. Yeltsin had told Americans, come on, make us also part of NATO. We want to be European Union. We want to join you in the initial years after the Soviet Union, imploded. So our contention is it was not asking for too much. And many American analysts and the Trump has said that, President Trump, that this war could have been avoided. There was no need. And finally, what will be the end state? Today, all the analysts, especially the Western ones, are clearly saying that the end state of war will be that Ukraine would have lost territory. Even President-elect Trump is saying so. And yet, you will not have Ukraine joining the NATO. So that situation could have been in November 2021. And we wouldn't have had so much loss of life and so much of money being burnt by Europeans, by everybody, including Americans. Of course, the only big beneficiary is the military-industrial complex of America. And as President Eisenhower had said in 1961, that the country is run by the military-industrial complex and the gun lobby in America. I mean, that's the way the influence these people have. So it's okay. I'm a military man. It's okay. But the point I'm making is that kind of a balancing we will do. We have to do. There is no choice. We are not aligned. We are not in a military alliance. NAM has now become strategic autonomy, if I may use that word. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed, sir, for your excellent lecture and your participation in the discussion. Just for the interlocutors anywhere, there's a famous saying which State Department used to use, that international relations are not zero-sum games. And that is what everyone needs to realize, that international relations are not zero-sum games. My heartful thanks to Air Marshal Anil Chopra. This is the first time he has been on our platform, but I can assure you he'll be coming more often on our platform. My thanks to our audience members on a Saturday morning or evening, wherever they are. They are choosing to spend more than an hour of their weekend time on a subject like this. My special thanks to Team CSA, Mr. Ripudaman Pachori and Mr. Rajiv Verma, people who work behind the screens, behind the sort of platform and make these things possible. So thank you everyone very much. This is our last program for year 2024. So what a grand finale. We shall resume with our activities after the holidays in January of 2025. Thank you very much indeed, Air Marshal Chopra.
Thank you. And it was a pleasure interacting. And I thought some of the questions were very, very relevant. And I'm sure that many of your viewers will be able to see this program on YouTube. Yes.
Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. And have a great day and good night for others. Yes.